Good morning and welcome to our coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. I am Bukola Koka, and coming up on the program today, 13 hostages, including women and children, to be released approximately 4 p.m. today. The support group for the families of the Israeli hostages says Hamas must give proof the hostages are alive. Plus, British Foreign Secretary David Cameron meets Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, stresses truce is crucial to get hostages out and aid into Gaza. Thank you for staying tuned. A 4-day pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas has come into effect, with both sides saying the pause is temporary. Smoke was seen rising over Gaza earlier this morning, minutes after the anticipated 4-day truce began in Gaza, the first pause in a 48-day-old war that has devastated the Palestinian enclave. The truce began at 7 a.m. However, a cloud of dark smoke was seen rising over Gaza 4 minutes after. Meanwhile, the sun rose over Israel's Ofer prison in the occupied West Bank near Ramallah today, where Palestinian prisoners are expected to be released as part of the Israel-Hamas temporary ceasefire deal. Israel launched its devastating war in Gaza after gunmen from Hamas burst across the border fence, killing 1,200 people and seizing about 240 hostages on October the 7th. Since then, more than 14,000 Gazans have been killed by Israeli bombardment, around 40% of them children. That's according to health authorities in the Hamas-ruled territory. Let's hear from the mediators in Qatar, which announced there will be a release of 13 Israeli women and children hostages beginning at 4 p.m. today. Qatar hopes to negotiate a subsequent agreement to release additional hostages from Gaza by the 4th day of the truce. But both sides have said they will go back to fighting once the truce is over.
We have just finished with all the communication with all parties in order to ascertain the lists of those civilians who will be freed as a result of the deal agreed upon by both parties. The lists have been handed to both sides, and finally, in a communication just now, the list has been handed to the Israeli intelligence service, the Mossad, in order to facilitate the implementation of the deal. The beginning of the pause will be 7 a.m. Friday, the 24th of November, and it will last, of course, as agreed, for 4 days. And the first batch of civilians to be released from Gaza will be around 4 p.m. of the same day. They will be 13 in number, all women and children, and those hostages who are from the same families will be put together within the same patch. Obviously, every day will include a number of civilians, as agreed, to total 50 within the 4 days. The communications that took place and the meetings that took place all through yesterday went on until early morning today with the Egyptians and the parties of the conflict present here in Doha. The meetings went very well and in a positive environment, and the results, of course, was the implementation plan of the agreement, which we have always said needed to be something that is concrete and very ready to create a safe environment for the release of the hostages. Regarding the Palestinians, I can't disclose right now information about how much, how many of them will be freed tomorrow, but I can tell you that the deal is a reciprocal deal, so we're expecting a release to happen also on the Israeli side. The humanitarian aid is an integral part of this deal. The aid will start going in within, of course, the calm period that will start at 7 a.m. So we are expecting aid to go in as soon as possible from Rafah crossing. You know that the aid has been there, within coordination with the Egyptians and all the international donors. So it's going to be coming in through the crossing as soon as we have a period of calm, where, of course, even the aid workers would be safe in going in. It would be a fraction of the need in Gaza. The need is so great in Gaza that no matter how much aid you are going to bring in, there will be certainly more need for aid. But we are hoping to bring in as much as possible within the confines of the deal. And of course, our aim is for this deal to end with a lasting truce. Right now, of course, the confines of this deal are these 4 days that are subject to a second phase and following phases of expanding the pause through the formula of getting more hostages out and therefore getting more time for the pause. We are hoping that momentum will carry, and that we would find this would open the door for further and more deep negotiations towards an end to this violence. One of the things that we are looking to happen during the 4 days of pause is to collect more information over the hostages, those who we have been told are not all with Hamas, and to get all the numbers, to get all the information. That would help in a second wave that we are hoping by the 4th day we'd have an agreement in place to release more hostages and thereby extend the pause in Gaza.
And before the truce began, Israelis in Tel Aviv had said they were happy a 4-day pause would begin between Israel and Hamas, and hostages would be released from Gaza. While some are happy a few hostages would be released, others said they wanted all the hostages to come home.
I want to hope, I hope that it's going to happen. We've been on such a roller coaster for certainly the past week, but since October 7th, between despair and trauma and hope. I just want to see the children come back. We want all of them to come back, but the first group of children will start breathing again, I think.
On one side, I'm very happy because we've been waiting for this for so long. It's been, I think, 46 or 7 days already since this entire thing started. So we've been waiting for this, and it's exciting. On the other hand, we have a bigger amount of hostages being there, and 13 is nothing next to the amount we want to have back.
Well, I'm happy that the hostages, or some of them at least, are going to be released. Hopefully everyone will, and this is the only thing that I care about at this very moment. I think all other things will be resolved later. It's not something that we don't think about, but we really need the hostages back now.
We are more than happy to hear this news. We are very happy with any hostages that are going to be released. We are still waiting to see Omer's name in one of these lists. We are waiting for him. The other thing that's super important to us is now, as part of this deal, that Hamas will allow organizations like UNICEF, like Red Cross, like UN, visit the hostages, supply some medication because some of them are ill. We are really hoping that Hamas will let other organizations, international organizations, visit the hostages and see them, and we can have more information.
And as a follow-up to that, the support group for the families of the Israeli hostages says Hamas must give proof the hostages are alive. Haggai Levin, head of the medical team for the group, said the ambiguity of the terms of release was disturbing. He added that the lack of proof of life was nerve-wracking for the families. And on the other hand, the group's head of diplomacy, Danny Sheikh, said the agreement with Hamas should set a precedent for more releases, adding it can't be a one-off.
I also hear now that there is a news from Qatar that there will be release of family hostages that are belong to the same family. Again, this is part of the psychological terror, because this, this general notion is very disturbing, not clear for everyone. What do they mean? Because they say 13, so the 13, we don't know one family of 13, they are a family of 7. A sign of life is to allow the Red Cross to visit them, and it's a disgrace that this does not happen, and this must happen. And if I think that you ask if any of them were able to contact their families, as far as we know, no. The issues that the Hamas did not provide as they have to, even though they are a terror organization, but they are organization and not a state, they have to deliver a proof of life. And the fact that they are not doing is nerve-wracking for the families. And the Red Cross today morning, I checked again, saying, sorry, we did not have any contact with any of the hostages. We cannot take even from you anything until we know that we can somehow transfer it. So maybe now things will change. I hope we, as the Families Forum, are ready to provide anything that is needed. Okay, if needed housing, we provide housing, and we are so stressing by people all over the world, by the way, because some of the families just got a call from Singapore from a family member, but all over the world, people are opening their hearts and their homes to support the families of the hostages.
I think that we should consider the execution of this agreement as a test case, because it has to serve just as a precedent. It can't be a one-off. And the Forum of Families and the families themselves, immediately after the conclusion of the happy conclusion, I hope, of this deal, will stand up and be ready for the next round.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused the United Nations of being slow to attend to the spiraling humanitarian crisis in Gaza, saying its relief workers had not entered a designated safe zone for Palestinian refugees. Mr. Netanyahu said Israel was doing everything in its power to avoid harming civilians, while Hamas was operating from within civilian and UN facilities, using population as a human shield.
I'm happy to say that there is a decline in civilian casualties, which is our goal. Our goal is to have none, and primarily that's because of the ground action. The ground action has resulted in the fact that the warnings that we give are addressed by the population, civilian population. They go south. When they go south, we give them humanitarian support. There are about 150 trucks now going in, probably go up to 200 and beyond. Food, medicine, water. I have not seen yet the effort that I'd like to see from the UN and the international agencies to build their shelters. Winter is coming, and there's no reason not to build tens of thousands of tents in the safe zone, next to the safe zone, because they don't enter the safe zone, the UN, which I think is shocking. I said, okay, we'll give you a lot of little zones. And they're building little safe zones to get the population out of harm's way. Israel is doing everything in its power to get the population out of harm's way. Hamas is doing everything in its power to keep the population in harm's way. And that's the fact. But I'll give you another one. We set up a safe corridor from the north of Gaza, where we were concentrating our effort against the terrorists, to the south. A safe zone in the south, safe corridor to the south. Hamas shot the safe corridor. They fired on the safe corridor, so the people will be trapped in. But they kept on leaving. They also hide behind their civilians. They deliberately implant themselves in hospitals, in schools, in residential areas, in UN facilities. They fire their rockets from there. Thousands of them. We might have an alert as we speak. There is no symmetry here. These people target directly our cities all the time. Thousands and thousands and thousands of rockets falling on Barcelona, falling on Madrid, falling on Brussels. falling on Antwerp, or any one of the European cities. Thousands. Israel is a small country. They deliberately target civilians and they deliberately hide behind civilians and use them as a human shield. That's a war crime.
In the meantime, British Foreign Secretary David Cameron has met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem after visiting the south of the country to see for himself the communities affected by last month's Hamas attacks. Mr. Cameron is also expected to meet Palestinian leaders later to discuss the way forward in the crisis.
So thank you very much for finding the time to see me. I wanted to come in person and go to the south of the country and go to Kibbutz Be'eri to see just the true nature of the horrific attacks that you faced. I think it's very important to do that and see that. And, you know, we stand with the people of Israel in sympathy for what you have gone through. I think that was important. But today, obviously, it's important we talk about this potential humanitarian pause. I think it's an opportunity to crucially get hostages out and to get aid into Gaza. There's never an excuse for this sort of hostage taking. All the hostages should be released. But I hope everyone who's responsible and behind this agreement can make it happen to bring relief to those families, including, of course, there are British nationals who've been taken hostage. And so let's hope that can be delivered. But thank you for the time. There's lots of things to talk about. It's very good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you, David, for coming here and standing with Israel. We hope to get our hostages out. It's not without its challenges, but we hope to get this first tranche out, and then we're committed to getting everyone out. But we'll continue with our war aims, namely to eradicate Hamas, because Hamas has already promised that they will do this again and again and again. They're a genocidal terrorist cult. There's no hope for peace between Israel and the Palestinians, between Israel and the Arab states, if we don't eradicate this murderous movement that threatens the future of all of us. I think it's a larger battle of civilization against barbarism, the kind of savagery that you saw on your visit. It's the worst savagery perpetrated on Jews since the Holocaust. And just as the world united to vanquish the Nazis or vanquish Al-Qaeda after 9/11, or vanquish ISIS, we have to unite to vanquish Hamas. Israel sustained proportionately 29 11s. 29 11s. It's as though 50,000 Americans were slaughtered in a single day, and 10,000 were held hostage, including a 9-month-old baby. He can't walk, he can't talk, he's a hostage. I mean, what kind of people do this? And the answer is, these are not people, these are monsters. These monsters have to go, they'll go, we'll pursue the battle until that goal is achieved. And we give a different future for Gaza and for us.
Still to come on the program, Israel says it found rockets tunnels in North Gaza refugee camp. We'll have that story and more coming your way after the break. Join us again. Welcome back. Let's now talk to Stephen Hayes. He's the President Emeritus, Corporate Council on Africa, and the former President, American Center on International Leadership, currently Partner Gainful Solutions. Mr. Hayes, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for holding on.
Good morning. Thank you.
Yes, let's begin with this. In the hours before the ceasefire was supposed to start, the IDF, according to reports, has escalated attacks in Gaza City. And I believe, I imagine rather, that this is crucial about the atmosphere amid the ceasefire and negotiations. What does this signal about the strategy of the IDF being implemented to secure the hostages and indeed implement the truce?
Well, I think Israel has wanted to reinforce that they're quite serious on this, that they're going to take it right to the letter of the agreement, and that's why they took it right to 7 a.m., I guess, local time in Gaza. So I think that it's going to be a very, very difficult 4 days. I expect the ceasefire to hold because I think the hostages are of prime importance, and certainly the women and children held in Israel by the Israelis also are important. So I think the ceasefire will likely hold, but it's going to be a very tense time, and then we'll see what happens day by day after that. Israel has said that for every 10 hostages released, it adds a day to the ceasefire. But I think Hamas is worried about the survival of their fighting forces thereafter. So I think each day is going to be tense. Each day that there is a ceasefire is good news. But again, I think it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, we've talked extensively about the potential difficulty amid that negotiation. But we've also heard the Qatari Foreign Ministry express an optimism about this ceasefire and the potential for an extension after this has been secured. But then again, the IDF has expressed ahead of this, hours before this ceasefire, distrust for the role of Qatar in this negotiation. And, how do we process the role of Qatar amid this distrust if, according to, so many sound bites we're hearing from Western media, that Qatar is also actually funding Hamas and that indeed their generals are living in 5-star hotels in, Doha. So how do we process Qatar's role in this negotiation?
I think that's a very central question. I think that to some, I suppose that Qatar could call it a necessary evil, depending on their point of view, that without Qatar, this ceasefire and this agreement would not be possible. So they are playing an essential role. They are funding Hamas. It's very well known. They've said as much. They've put in at least $1.5 billion by all news reports to Hamas, paying for a lot of things, not simply the Hamas army, but paying for teachers. It's not an entirely bad sign that they're putting money into that, but because they have been keeping the education system going, and they've been supporting some of the health system as well. So it's yes, they're funding Hamas, but in Hamas is running Gaza, and therefore they're also funding some necessary systems. At least they've been necessary until now, and now obviously they're dysfunctional. The role of Hamas is intriguing because it has such a strong relationship with Iran. At the same time, there's a U.S. military base in Qatar that just makes it all absolutely intriguing. I think Qatar is probably going to play a more important role in the future in negotiations in the Middle East because of what they've done here. Now, how well they do that and how balanced it becomes will determine their future with credibility. But they've played a very interesting, some would say a very negative role in keeping conflicts going as well. What's also intriguing to me and adds to the mystique of Qatar is that most of the Muslim population, and the country is about 85% Muslim, is Sunni, and Iran is Shiite. So all that is just making this a country of greater intrigue.
And there's more intrigue, Mr. Hayes, if it's true that Qatar and Iran indeed are providing support for Hamas. What then becomes of the resolve of Israel that Hamas must be destroyed militarily and politically? Can Israel achieve this aim if Hamas is receiving support from these countries?
Well, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to wipe them out completely. And I think that if Hamas were to just simply disappear, there's going to be something else to take its place. You can't expect the existence of a central core to disappear. There needs to be some type of governance, some type of communication, so it's not in anybody's interest that that communication disappear. Whether they can, Israelis can eliminate Hamas, I think is up for question. I think what the Gaza invasion has done, it's created greater resistance. It's creating long-term resistance from a population that perhaps wasn't quite as committed to resistance until now. I think it's going to be a very, very difficult time. Israel may have created a situation for an endless war. On the other hand, they have essentially eliminated northern Gaza for right now. It's 12,000 buildings have been destroyed, according to news reports. 15,000 people killed. And what happens with that strip of land that now has essentially been destroyed I suspect is going to become a no man's land and cramp people even further. So the ultimate objective of this, I think, goes beyond Hamas.
Indeed. And just to expand the subject about intrigues a little further, amid the leadership of the Arab countries themselves, there is no, unanimity about, implementing sanctions against Israel. Now, what does this say, about, the future of Israeli-Arab relations, between that country and the other Arab countries?
I think that's a central question. I think it's an excellent question, frankly. You hit on the central issue that the Arab countries haven't really come out that strongly against Israel in terms of any concrete actions. They haven't put military support into the Palestinians. I think that people are tired of the issue. I think they want to solve this, and they're not going to solve it by continuing the antagonism towards one another. It's going to be a difficult negotiations back, but I think that if anything, because we've come so close to expanding this war in so many ways, people are now saying that maybe it's time, finally, that we look at the two-state solution or find ways to solve this. I think Netanyahu's way is simply to try to wipe out the population one way or another as refugees or beyond back into Egypt, but Egypt's not going to be able to handle that, nor would Jordan. So there really needs to be a solution to this, and I think people are keeping their channels open right now and the opportunities open rather than returning to the total animosity between Israel and the Middle East nations. But it is interesting that even Iran hasn't stepped up to support the Palestinians other than verbally. And of course, Iran's probably been doing the primary arming of Hamas, but that also looks like that is going to be a big question, whether that continues after this. I think it's important also to note that Hamas has not allowed elections in Gaza since 2007. So it's almost, to me, an occupying force of its own area, as ridiculous as that might sound. But the fact that they're not allowing a voice for its own people is interesting.
And we hope amid all of that, there is the doors are open for continuing conversation despite the distrust. And as we close them gradually, and I'd like for you to keep this as short as possible. The U.S. is increasingly voicing concern about the IDF's, prosecution of this war. What does this say about, do you worry that this is placing a strain on relations between U.S. and Israel, considered longtime allies?
To answer it simply, yes, it is putting a strain on. There is a split in the United States. There is more criticism of Israel probably than there ever has been since the creation of Israel. So yes, there is a strain. It's going to have to be worked out over time as well.
Thank you very much for keeping it short, Mr. David Hayes. Thank you so much for your time and contributions on the program. Mr. David Hayes is a former president, American Center on International Leadership, and currently partner Gainful Solutions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Video released by the Israeli army shows soldiers allegedly finding weapons, tunnel shafts and missiles in what they claim is in Gaza's Jabalia area. Israeli commanders appear on the footage saying they found a tunnel shaft in a mosque and missiles of different sizes in the urban area. The location has not been independently verified, nor the date when the video was filmed. Israel says its strikes in the past day had hit military command centers, underground terror tunnels, weapon storage facilities, weapon manufacturing sites, and anti-tank missile launch posts. Israel has also released video purportedly showing strikes on Hezbollah targets across the border in Lebanon. Israel claims the footage, which was released today, shows the attacks made a day before. According to an Israeli military statement, the targets include Hezbollah infrastructure in Lebanon, including sites that Israel says were used as launch pads towards Israel over the past few days, and sites allegedly used for Hezbollah operations. Israel and Hezbollah, an ally of militant group Hamas, have traded escalating rocket fire along the Lebanese border following Hamas's October 7 attack on Israel. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and his Belgian counterpart Alexander De Croo have met the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas at Ramallah in the West Bank. Both leaders, representing the current and upcoming rotating presidencies of the Council of the European Union, respectively, arrived at the Palestinian president's office after visiting Israeli leaders. Spain's Sanchez proposed an international peace conference on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to forge a viable Palestinian state in a meeting on Thursday with Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. Australian students in their hundreds skipped class in Sydney to protest for the freedom of Palestinians. Students of all ages, from primary school to university students, gathered outside Sydney's town hall this morning with banners and Palestinian flags before marching through the city chanting slogans. The protest comes a day after thousands of school students in Melbourne gathered for a Free Palestine protest. Australian state and federal leaders urged students to stay in school and not attend the protests.
I'm here today because all the people in Palestine are getting bombed.
And it's important for young children to understand the importance of all of this that's happening. No matter the religion, no matter the culture, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, doesn't really matter at all. Just as long as people respect each other and have the same values that we all walk.
I think it's important to bring my children here so that they are aware of what is going on around the world. Why did I bring you here, Zubs?
To stop the genocide in Palestine and to know what's happening in Palestine.
And still to come on the program, Cuban president leads a pro-Palestine march past U.S. Embassy in Havana. More details later. To join us again.
Palestina libre, que viva Cuba libre, cese la guerra y que viva la paz. Palestina libre, Palestina libre, Palestina libre.
Tens of thousands of Cubans marched in front of the United States Embassy in Havana, charging Israel with genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. What made this march more interesting is that they were led by President Miguel Diaz-Canel on Thursday, November the 23rd. The march on Thursday, which moved along Havana's Seaside Drive, the Malecón, where the U.S. diplomatic headquarters is located, was the first of its kind in more than a decade. The crowd supporting Palestinian flags and banners chanted, "Free Palestine, Israel is genocide," and "Up with Palestinian freedom," as it marched by the building and rallied nearby. Cuba has been a strong backer of the Palestinian cause for decades and has trained more than 200 Palestinian doctors. It does not have diplomatic relations with Israel. And joining us now for more on the Israel-Palestine war is a professor in the Department of History and Strategic Studies, UNILAG, Professor David Awurawo. Professor Awurawo is speaking to us virtually from Akoka. Thank you for joining us, Professor Awurawo. I guess you can hear me, so let's start off immediately from what seems to be a wider scale of this war, particularly the understanding and the approach of leaders in the international community. Yesterday, we had the UN ambassador to Israel addressing the Security Council, and he said, without quoting him copiously, he condemned the politicized condemnation, baseless suggestion, and distorted calls for calm and extensive outcry of the humanitarian situation in Gaza, which, according to him, is one-sided. And he called for a balance in the UN approach to tackling or responding to the situation. How do you view this, particularly with against the backdrop of the increasing pressure on Israel to ceasefire in Gaza? Professor Awurawo, are you there? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, but I didn't hear your question.
The UN Security Council's approach to responding to the humanitarian situation in the war, which the UN ambassador to Israel condemned wholesale during the meeting yesterday in the United Nations headquarters. How do you weigh in on this? Do you particularly agree that, in fact, the UN has been one-sided in its response, either via statements or the lack of, what the UN ambassador calls a resolution, a unified and balanced resolution on a security response to the humanitarian situation in Gaza?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, the UN hasn't done enough. It is very clear. The organization that is saddled with the responsibility for maintaining global peace and security is the United Nations, specifically the United Nations Security Council. But it hasn't done enough. The way this war has gone, it is clear that the UN has failed once again to live up to expectation in its objective of promoting global peace and security. But like I've always said, the United Nations does not exist in isolation of the international community. The support that the global community gives is the basis for the success or failure of the United Nations. Take, for instance, the resolution that was presented a few days ago. After 4 failures, there were, efforts were made to ensure that that one did not fail. 12 countries voted in support of that resolution for a ceasefire to allow for humanitarian provision for those who have suffered terribly in this war. 3 key countries, United States, United Kingdom, and Russia, abstained from voting. Can you imagine the US and the UK abstaining from voting on that critical issue that will make provision for humanitarian assistance to those who have suffered terribly in Gaza? That is why the UN has not been able to live up to expectation, because the key countries that are supposed to give it support to make it work are hypocritical. They are always, focused on their national interest, and the leaders are focused on their own narrow political, opportunism. They don't want to lose ground politically at home, and that has influenced their decision. So it is true that the UN has not lived up to expectation. The UN has failed woefully in intervening in this conflict the way it ought to, both to ensure that the violence did not escalate, and also to make provisions for humanitarian assistance. But one can easily explain why that is the case. The key countries in the global system are hypocritical, and that has led to the UN not being able to live up to expectation as required.
Besides the hypocrisy, what do you believe to be, if any, the political undertones informing the United Nations lethargy in its approach to, in its lack of response, for a germane security response to the humanitarian situation for both sides in Gaza?
Like I just said, the United Nations Security Council has 15 members. 5 of them are permanent members. These are also the most influential, the most powerful. The United States and United Kingdom are 2 of the most powerful ones of the 5 permanent members. Russia, too, also abstained from voting, in that key UN resolution. That means that 3 key of the 15 countries, abstained from supporting the UN resolution. They abstained. But the other 12, fortunately, voted in favor. So that simply just explains why that is so. Now, what are the domestic political issues? If in the United States, Biden is facing an election in the next couple of months, and public opinion in the United States is pro-Israel, and the Israeli lobby in the US is very powerful. Biden doesn't want to lose that support. In the United States, Sunak too is behind in the in the opinion polls. He also wants to do something that will make a key section of the British society to support him. So that is what has influenced where we are. This narrow interest, narrow political interest. Now let me just add this. Why these countries abstain from voting in that key United Nations resolution, the United States is at the forefront of the negotiations of this ceasefire that will enable her to secure the release of the hostages, the Americans among the hostages, about 11 of them or so. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, has been moving from pillar to post and has been very successful. Let's give that credit to him and some of the American diplomats who have worked with Qatar and Egypt to ensure that the ceasefire that will likely take off in the next couple of hours, that will lead to the release of some hostages, 39 in the first instance for the Palestinians, 13 for Israel, maybe 1 or 2 Americans will be among them. And then, of course, 150 in total, 50 Israelis, and then 150 on the other. That's 3 for 1, 3 for 1. And Americans are among them. So while the United States does not want to, is supporting Israel on the other side, it is also making efforts to ensure that its citizens that are captured are released. Of course, in addition to the Israelis that have been captured as well. That illustrates the hypocrisy. While in the open, they are not supporting the resolution for a ceasefire, they are also negotiating on the other side to ensure that their citizens are released here and there. That is the summary of the hypocrisy. And these are things that must change for the UN to be able to function properly and fulfill its objective of maintaining global peace and security.
Interesting. Over time, Israel, the IDF, has continued to release evidence that, according to it, proves that Hamas is building tunnels underground, is hiding hostages in those tunnels and hiding weapons. But there's a huge distrust, in fact, a lot of skepticism about the evidence that the IDF continues to release on the international community. And much of the protests that we've seen the world over are more pro-Palestinian. How informed are these protests about what exactly is going on in the Gaza Strip and in Israel? And how do you process, what do you think about this distrust for the evidence that the IDF is releasing?
Yeah, there are good reasons to be skeptical, because some of the evidence that Israel presented initially, when it was subjected to analysis, forensic analysis, it was established that some of it was not true, which was why Israel had to go and quickly delete from their X account some of these things. But I also think that some of the evidence Israel has provided is genuine. These weapons and all that, I think some of the evidence is genuine. It's not all totally false. So, but like I said several times, this is consistent with the way militants and terrorists operate. They mix with the population, they keep weapons within the population, so that they know that the rest of the global community will be hesitant to attack a vulnerable civilian population, and that is where they are safest. So it's not surprising that weapons are found in those places. Some of it is genuine, but Israel didn't do well by exaggerating some of it initially, which has now caused a great deal of skepticism regarding the evidence that Israel is providing. But beyond that, what has to happen now is the way forward, the way for genuine and sustainable peace. The deal that has just been reached to release hostages and to pause fighting for 4 days is a good one. I regard that as the immediate. I mean, the long term, the short term rather. There has to be a medium term and a long term. The medium term has to be how to negotiate to bring the war itself to an end, because the deal has been negotiated just in the last couple of days and may come into effect today. Is only for prisoners to be exchanged and then pausing for 4 days. There has to be some negotiation to lead to some permanent ending of this war. And the long term will be to revive the Middle East peace process. It's 20 years now since the roadmap to peace was developed, and unfortunately, it was not allowed to see light of day. We need to revive that. Obama tried 2013, 2014 to revive it. It was not successful. We need to return to that so that there will be a comprehensive negotiation that will lead to, this conflict that have become almost incessant to be brought to an end.
Indeed, that is the hope, and it's a fine place to leave it. Thank you so much, Professor David Awurawo, for your time and contribution on the program today. Professor Awurawo is a lecturer in the Department of History and Strategic Studies, University of Lagos, and he joined us from Akoka here in Lagos, Southwest Nigeria. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me on the program.
There was a damper on a Thanksgiving parade in New York when pro-Palestinian protesters blocked the marchers' route. Protesters sat down in the middle of 6th Avenue between West 56th and 55th Street as balloons and floats started moving south from Central Park. Other protesters among the crowd chanted "Free Palestine" and held Palestinian flags aloft. And that's it on the program today. 4 p.m. local time in Israel, Gaza is the time to watch out for, as we hope that 12 hostages, according to authorities, will be released. Thank you for your time on the program today. Join us again, same time next week, when we'll bring you another round of editions of our continuing coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. I am Bukola Koka. Bye for now.